What is up, everybody? Welcome to the stream. Had to get a few things set up real quick, but we've got Grievous and pieces on the table. So we're gonna get to painting this guy. First things first, what I've done is I had a seam right along his cloak here. And so to help clean that up a little bit, I take a little bit of matte varnish and brush it into the seam. It helps hide that seam just a little bit as it dries. So I'll let that dry a little bit more before we get too much work done on that. It goes all the way around and off underneath, so we'll get started there. So before I talk too much more, I need to get a drink and then we'll get started. Sorry about that, I am back. Alright, on to my wet palette. Let's get it. Take a look here. What do we got? So, from when I was painting my droids, I have a gray metallic blend right here that I think is going to work well for Grievous. And then what I'm going to use for his main skin is an Army Painter Brainmatter. Let's see if I can get it in focus here. For some reason it doesn't want to. Anyways, if you can read that, it says Brainmatter Beige. I think that's going to be a good color for him once we give it a nice sepia wash. So, let me get my computer set back here so it's out of the way. I've already pre-made his base because I made it while I was working with the droids the other day. So that's ready to go. Get my fan turned so it's cooling me off a little bit. It gets warm in my paint studio. Okay, let's get this Brainmatter Beige shaken up and ready to go. If you're in here hanging out with me, let me know. Drop me a message in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. But we're going to start on his face. So, I've got a reference photo pointed up there. I'm just having a look in it. I don't think his head is so small. I don't think I'm going to be able to get it to where you can see it very well while I'm painting it. All I've done is I've hot glued it on a stick, and then I've primed it with a gray primer. Nothing fancy. I got some matte varnish in a place I don't want it on that cloak, so I'll take care of that. Alright. So, I know on camera that Brainmatter Beige looks like white, but I promise it's not. It is very much a beige color. I need to clean up my paint desk one day soon. Time for some Zen painting. It will, it's whatever. Uh-oh. What the heck? Sorry about that. Not sure what happened. Somehow I think I lost the stream for a second. So anyways, as I was saying, it's whatever Pretzel Rocks ends up playing. It's on their adventure stream or whatever. I don't know, Epic. Something like that. Alright. So. We've got a nice thin Brainmatter Beige color here. And we're just putting that on everywhere. We're going to do a couple thin coats. The area that we can't hit because of the hot glue is going to be just fine because it's going to be glued onto his neck. So I'm going to try to get as much out of the eyes as possible. Right, we will let that dry real quick. We'll go into some of this I didn't get my brush clean enough, but that little bit of Brainmatter Beige isn't going to matter a whole lot. We're going to get down some fresh Necromancer Cloak paint here, and we're going to start working on on his cloak a little bit. Get it thinned out. We're going to work on two different pieces while they dry back and forth. So no, I don't want to touch that yet. The matte varnish isn't quite dry. It looked dry from over here till I picked it up. Give that a few more minutes. So here's how I've got my Grievous set up with the gun and two sabers. It took some finagling, so what we can do while we're waiting is we can get these sabers painted white. I always paint the saber blades white or whatever white-like color I'm using, because it's going to help give a very bright color underneath once we're ready to put that color on there. And we'll go with one blue and one green. We'll see about doing some light OSL work here, possibly. And I'm just taking a look at what do we got here. So first things first is we'll go into that color I was talking about at the beginning of the stream, which is going to be just a little bit of metallic with some Necromancer Cloak in there, and that's going to give a somewhat metal look to Grievous, but not too bad, not too strong. I think that's the word I was looking for. And we'll start covering all of the areas that are that way. So like the foot, the feet, and these little back springs. Let me paint on stream here. I'm really bad about that. And if you get a little bit on to some areas that are going to have white on it, that's okay. We can fix it. Do some lighting adjustments here. So like I said, it's mostly a Necromancer Cloak with just a little bit of gunmetal mixed in, just to give it a little bit of sparkle. Nothing too fancy. Like when I say just a little bit, it's probably like 5 parts Necromancer to 1 part gunmetal, if that, maybe 6 to 1. What you hear rattling as I turn it is this container that I'm using to hold him on has rocks in it. Some of my basing rocks. It just gives it a little bit of heft, helps me with my shakiness. Hit my head on the lamp. So I tend to shake a lot when I paint, as I imagine many of you do. So I had to find little tips and tricks to help me overcome that. A little bit of weight in the handle helps me do that. The other thing that I help is I keep my forearms propped on my desk, and that helps manage that shake as well. Which is part of the reason you'll see me commonly creep up towards the top of my screen while I'm painting, is because I'm slowly inching my arms forward to try to get them propped on the desk better. So part of this painting puts me in a position that I'm not used to working at, but we'll make it work. So how are things going in your life today? If you're in here watching, let me know. The nice thing about Grievous is he's not too many colors, so we'll get to focus on really building up some of these other colors and really bringing out some highlights and things rather than having to spend a lot of time with a large color palette. Or you can completely just botch everything like I do and overshoot. Let's try that again. Remember, thin coats, but working with the black it covers pretty well. Make sure you get up in between his little chest plates, or not chest plates, shin plates. It's an easy thing to forget to do. And he's mostly black on the back side. And if you're doing the cloak like I am, it's not going to be hugely important because you won't see it. But still want it to be somewhat accurate. If you're going for movie accurate. If you're not, you paint your Grievous however you would like. More power to you. Just working on putting the gray down, giving that white over on the head a good chance to dry. Now you could have not assembled him first and it would make it a little bit easier to get to some of these areas. But I really needed to get an idea of how I was going to put them together. So I had to assemble him all the way in. With his ball joints, it's not like you can snap fit them like the old Star Wars Legion models. So he got put together completely. You could prime him black. It's going to make painting some of those cream areas a little bit harder. But if you prime him black, you won't have to worry about missing any areas as much as if somebody painted him gray or white. And to be honest, I don't think he would look terrible primed black. A lot of times people don't prime black because you get a little bit duller colors. But I don't think it would be a big deal on Grievous. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'll answer what I can. I enjoy interacting with my audience. Or you can sit quietly and watch the stream. Whatever works for you. Send us the way of Jacket Fresh. Right now I'm using some cheap Princeton brushes, but I have a whole bunch of Army Painter brushes on the way. So I have a Winsor & Newton that, to be honest, I'm just too afraid of messing up to use because I'm not very nice to my brushes. These are, I think this brush was a couple bucks at Michael's or Hobby Lobby or whatever your local craft store is. I also have a set of 100, or not 150 size 1 brushes that I use. Got them off Amazon for like 16 bucks and they work pretty well. I just tried them out for the first time. So if you're looking for budget brushes, it's literally called One Happy Choice brand, size 1. There's 20 bucks or 16 to 20 bucks for a 50 pack. And you know what? When they get gunked up and I don't want them anymore, I throw them away. Because they were 16 bucks for 50 of them. So I don't feel bad. Whereas my Winsor & Newtons, I wear them out quick. I've used Army Painter brushes in the past, and I do like them. I just don't have a store local that sells them to me. Or, no, it's not just me they don't sell them to. I don't have a store local that carries Army Painter products. So it makes it a little tough for me to get a hold of them. Why aren't you using 3D printed handle? Because I had them all used for the droids, and I had hot glued him to one already when I hot glued the droids on. And a lot of times when I'm working with a miniature that I plan on taking to like a extra higher, like a higher level of detail, I want a little bit heavier handle, and this one has rocks in the bottom of it to make it a little heavier. As I mentioned earlier in the video, it helps with my shakes. So we're just being pretty sloppy with this base coat, trying to avoid the white areas as much as possible, or what's going to be quote-unquote white, you know, the Brainmatter Beige. It's actually a beige color, because it's a little harder to cover this with, or white with this. But if you get a little bit on the areas, it's not a problem, because we're going to have to put a couple coats on those plates anyways. I don't know if they'll be releasing a handle. I did suggest it to them. I don't think they have a hobby holder right now. Hey, Sarth. Thanks for sharing. Or thanks for the compliments. If you guys feel like sharing, feel free to share this around. Get some peeps in the stream. Alright. We're going to wash our brush real quick. We're going to set old Grievous off to the side. Make sure I get all my black out of there. I have been trying to paint in frame. Every once in a while I move out. When I look up to the camera, or when I look up to the monitor to see the chat, is when I tend to drift out of frame. Alright, second coat of Brainmatter Beige on this face. We'll let that guy dry. Sorry, Mike, I missed your question. I use tap water. Nothing fancy. I got a small bubble in my matte medium, or matte varnish that I'm using to seal this gap. So we'll solve that real quick. I feel like I'm on trial here, Dan. Alright, we're gonna give a second coat here to the lightsabers. Again, this white equivalent that we're using tonight is Brainmatter Beige. When was the 6th? Was that last Tuesday or Monday? Probably Gen Con recovery. Alright. Get some white applied on here. Again, work with thin coats of your white. It's going to take multiple. Just plan on that ahead of time. And you won't be disappointed when you have to do multiple coats of white. The white on the saber blades is to give the saber colors, when I apply them, a little bit brighter of a base. So it's going to help them be a brighter blue and a brighter green. Because if you apply color over black, it tends to dull it just a little bit. He comes in here, he misses the parts where I explain why I'm doing what I'm doing, and then asks me the same questions again. I hope you know I'm joking. But yeah, I did answer that earlier. No, it's just the Brainmatter Beige paint. My white equivalent that I'm using tonight. Skeleton bone is going to be a little too dark on these guys. And so I'll probably end up swapping this out for my Stormtroopers as well. That way I don't have to custom mix my color anymore. I kind of forgot I had this color in my drawer as I throw General Grievous at my arm. Just painting white on there. Trying to be more in stream, but I promise if I miss getting something in stream, I'm probably going to paint that part again, or in focus, or frame, or whatever it's called. I'll probably end up painting that part again anyways, so we are only painting one Grievous tonight. I do have a couple more to paint. Another one for me, and one for a customer. My son's getting into Legion, and so he wants a couple of his characters for his own. So when he was with me at Gen Con, we bought some, and I told him he could use the clones out of the 2 sets. So I get the droids out of the 2 sets. Officially, the clones are mine, but they're going to be his army to use. Normally I would paint everything one color. I don't know what I'm doing, but one coat and then come back and do the other coats. So, but before I go any further on that, I want to apply another coat to the face, just because I want to be able to start working on that face soon. I will be making a whole droid army, so I collect all the things Star Wars Legion. If you haven't seen my droids, I did an assembly guide on them the other day on how I put them together. Spent a couple hours on stream assembling 2 squads of them, and then painted them up on stream. Or I didn't paint them up on stream, painted them up off stream and posted videos of them, but here's essentially what they turned out looking like. If I can get them in focus. So, they're Geonosis colors. They look much more brown on camera than they do in real life. I'm not sure what that's about, so. I know that's what people say a lot of times, but it's true in this case, at least in my eyes. Alright. Just take your time when you're painting this white on. Again, thin coats. Thin coats of white. Oh, I meant to paint his gun gray. I forgot. We'll have to go back and fix that. I know I'm off stream, sorry. I was really trying to get a brace real quick for a minute for this part. Oh, the whole inside of his arm is black. I didn't realize that. Every once in a while I'll just reach in, rinse my brush out, make sure I get all that paint out before it gets up in the ferrule. Not that it matters, this brush is worn out anyways. But it's good practice for your expensive brushes once you get to that. This is just an old worn out size 0 that I'm using for base coating. We got 7 viewers in here. I think that's an all-time high for me at one time. Feel free to drop a message in the chat. I don't mind talking with y'all. Just to update where we're at and what we're doing. We're applying Army Painter Brainmatter Beige to all of the white/tan areas of old Mr. Asthma here. Best way to clean your brushes is going to be with a brush soap. So whatever your preferred brush soap is, I have a couple different pucks that I have. This one's going to be hard to read because it's been painted over, but the Master's Brush Cleaner. The one I tend to use more frequently is Gentastic's Drunken Brush Goop. You can find this online. Just look up Gentastic's Drunken Brush Goop from slowfusegaming.com. I don't know why I use it more. It works great, but they both work great. You can find the Masters at any of your local hobby stores, craft stores, I should say. So Michael's Hobby Lobby. Gentastic stuff is a special order off the internet. So what you do is you take whatever your brush soap is. This one's a little dried out on the top, so I gotta get it wet again. Take some water. I'm not pushing too hard in there. And it should lather up like that. Yeah, there's a lot of detail in the arms. So I've got this up to a nice lather, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out some of that lathered soap on my brush here with a little bit of water and just in the palm of my hand. I'm not going to be able to resuscitate this brush, it's long dead. There's paint in the ferrule, it's not holding together anymore. And you're going to clean it until you no longer see color coming out. And then rinse it off with water, and like I said, this brush is not salvageable. It's just a base coat brush. But that's how you would clean it. And then if you wanted to store it for a while, you could put a little bit of the soap in there, shape it back to the point that you want. And then it helps condition the brush as well. Alright, while we're waiting here, this face is dry, so we'll take one more coat. We've still got some gray poking through in a few areas. I think one more coat will do it. And put that last coat on there. Give the brush an good rinse. Pick up some more of this Brainmatter Beige, and back to the arms. Again, don't be disappointed. It's going to take a couple of coats to cover this. That's going to be the longest part, is getting this white base coat down. So I've got my base coat brushes and I have detail brushes. My base coat brushes tend to be a little more worn out. They're just for not being super careful. I push the brush in weird ways, and I don't care if they get messed up really. Then my detail brushes are what I come back later and ended up doing the real work with. There's no difference between the two. My detail brushes are just newer versions of my they're just new brushes, is what I was trying to say. My brain stopped for a second. Not sure what happened there. White, Brainmatter Beige. You could use a white if you wanted to, and then wash it with this like a soft tone in order to make it a little bit brown. We're going to wash this with a soft tone as well, and it'll make it even more of that iconic Grievous color. So what we'll probably end up doing is, once we get to the wash step, we'll apply the wash on some of these large plates and then wipe it off, so it just colors it. Because we don't want it to pool on the large plates. If you want to know how thin I'm working with here, it's still somewhat transparent when I paint it on my fingernail, but it almost acts like water on there. So like, and that wipes right off. But so everyone says, you know, thin your paints to the consistency of milk. That's a good general guideline. But then my question became, what kind of milk? Because 2% milk is very different than whole milk. So I'm also a smartass like that. So the best way I've found to make sure that it's not too thick is to just paint it on your thumbnail. If it looks splotchy on there, it's going to look splotchy in your miniature. If you're not getting any coverage on your thumbnail, you're not going to get any coverage on your miniature. And the cool thing is, when you're done, you have a nice, unique manicure. We're not going to put as much detail work onto this back because you will never see it on this miniature with the way the cape's going to be on him, but we at least want the colors in there. I'm really big on don't spend your time on parts that aren't going to be seen. Or don't waste your time. Get them the color they need to be and leave them that way. If I were doing a show quality piece, then yeah, the whole miniature would get the same treatment. But I'm not. I'm doing pieces that you'd be teaching you how to do pieces that you'd be happy to put on the table and say, hey, I painted that. For my reference photo, I'm using a photo that I found online from one of the high-end toy kits. You know, the collector's toy kits like Hot Toys or something like that. I don't know which brand it was, but they tend to be pretty movie accurate. Alright, we're going to let that dry. Check on our matte varnish over here. It still has a small bubble in it. We can get it out though. The seam on this cloak was something terrible, and I tried my best to try to get it all sealed up, so it takes a little work. I may have to break down and put a little green stuff in there if I can't get it. We will see. Grabbed my wrong brush. Don't worry about if you make mistakes. It's easier to cover the white with black than it is the opposite. Alright, so we're going to start over and start giving everything a second coat. Second coat of white. Well, Brainmatter Beige. All around. And we'll probably have to get one more coat after this yet. Just because white colors are notoriously bad for coverage. Which is why I hate painting stormtroopers / clones / any all-white units. And typically I'll do those with my airbrush. Makes light work of them. Sorry about bumping the camera there. Let me get that fixed. Not sure how I managed to pull that off. Again, if you get a little bit over into the black, don't worry about it. We can come back and touch that up with a fine brush. I'd rather come back and touch that up than try to touch up little black marks all over the white. So I'm probably going to toss a poll up if I can figure out how. Apparently you can't do polls on Facebook pages. You can do them like in a group or something. But I need to figure out, offer a few options for what nights would be best for people that want to watch the stream regularly. I need to get this thing nailed down to a regular night rather than just kind of when I feel like it. I know Tuesdays have been my regular thing and that's what I'm leaning towards. As being my regular go-to night, but I'm not sure if that's going to work for everyone. Nope. I don't want circus music. Well, maybe. Let's see. Nope, we'll skip that. So if you have an idea what night you think would be best, feel free to post it in the comments. What night works best for you as a viewer? If you had to pick one night that you would for sure get a stream from me, what night would you want that to be? Wednesdays are out, so I will throw that out there to begin with. Wednesdays are my RPG nights. Neglected the shin plates here a little bit. Alright, let's have a look-see at our couple pieces that are over here drying. Matte varnish is still drying on this guy. And we are looking very good here. So I'm just getting a look at what we're going to do. I need to pull up a video or a picture of his bust. Mondays are fine for you, John? Your only day is Saturday, so all of my streams you have to watch later. You're here with me now, though, Mike. Alright. I've got my picture pulled up. So, inside the eye. I think I have a nice deep red that will work for that. And it's going to be Army Painter Vampire Red. Let me get some a ball bearing in here because I've not used this. Alright. So I'm going to bleed off just a little bit of the medium. They told you to stay home. Well, there you go. So, shaking the tar out of this. That's the one thing about Army Painter paints that you have to keep in mind if you're going to use them, is you got to shake the tar out of them when you first open them. Shake them a lot. A couple minutes. I know it's boring to watch me shake paint. Sorry. Alright, so for this I'm going to need a pretty fine tip brush to get into where I need to. So I'm going to take a fine tip 1. Thin down that red paint real good. And then get inside his eye sockets. And if we go over a little bit, that's fine. We can cover it with some of the white later. Now it looks like a lot right now. I don't think I'll get that in focus. It's pretty small. You drop 2 of them in there. I just do the 1. Alright. The other thing we're going to do is these little streaks on his head. Take some thin down Necromancer Cloak. Not thin down enough. All right. And then for his mouthpiece, we're going to take some pure gunmetal. And hit these little lines on his mouth. I know it's real hard to see what I'm doing, that's why I'm trying to localize more so. I mean, you just need to get some fresh stuff. This one's pretty, paint's pretty wore out and thin. need some fresh paint. That bottle's almost gone. I'm trying to milk that bottle of gunmetal for all it's worth. For his little respirator marks or whatever they are. Voice box cover. Asthma nebulizer. I'm not sure what they are. Alright, we'll set that aside and let it dry a little bit. There's a spot that the Brainmatter Beige didn't quite cover as well on this piece that I wanted. Alright, set him aside for a minute, check again on how this is drying over here. I think we've dried up. Alright, so we're going to go into our pure Necromancer Cloak for this part and cover this whole thing. Minus the very inner neck piece, that's going to be Brainmatter Beige. So, thin paint. What the Necromancer Cloak is going to allow us to do is come back and wash it later, and we'll get a black when we wash it. Again, I cheat and use washes when I paint, so when I'm painting stuff that's intended to be handled and touched and played with, you should do it too if you would like. Don't feel bad. Or if you want, you can spend hours building up individual highlights too, that's fine. I've done it. We'll probably do some selective washing with this, certain parts of him. And we're going to have to be careful putting on the black wash onto the metallic parts of him also when we get to that step. I don't actually like the quilted underside on this, but it's pretty detailed and it lets us do some cool work with it. You could pick out as much detail under there as you want, or as little. We'll pick out a few. We're not going to do every single little quilt, because not all of it would be highlighted, but even naturally. But we'll pick some out. So. Make sure you get that black all the way up to the edge of the quilt. Probably out of frame. That's a special superpower I have, is painting out of frame. Alright. We will let that dry real fast. And we'll go back and look at our Grievous body and see if there's any areas that need more of this brain matter on there. Anything that's maybe not as covered as well as we would like this kneecap. this hand for sure. This other hand. Now this whole arm probably could use another coat. Somehow I missed completely painting under that pauldron altogether. I dropped my brush on the ground. One of them. Anyways. Like I said, areas that are going to be covered by the cloak I'm not focusing as much on. Just want to make sure the colors are there so if you catch a glimpse of it, it doesn't look unpainted. Hope you guys are enjoying watching me paint as much as I'm enjoying painting this guy right now. Alright. Let's go into that Necromancer Cloak and Metallic mix that I had mentioned earlier in the stream. It's a little bit of gunmetal in some Necromancer Cloak, and we'll get the gun with it real quick. And I missed the inside of this arm with it, so on the reference photo I'm looking at, it is black on the inside of the arm. So make sure we get that. Almost went into the wrong color paint there. I think we'll use this for one of the saber hilts also. And then we'll come back and touch it up with some silver gunmetal or whatever. Yeah, we'll do both of them that way and then touch up the areas that aren't supposed to be black with another color. Alright. We're going to do the underneath of his cloak is going to be the same vampire red as I paint out a stream again. And if you mess over onto the black, that is okay. It's going to be easy to touch up the areas with the black. I just like to give myself an outline, so I'm not even trying to be super neat and not get it on there. Touch-ups will come later. And when you use the wash method, you'd be amazed at how many mistakes a wash will help cover up. So this will take a couple coats of red, just because red's another notoriously bad color for coverage. I'm not sure why the armies I like have to be the most difficult colors to paint. You know, Imperials, blacks, whites, and reds. Reds on the railguards. Droids. Whites, tans, and reds and blacks. Alright, so here's how we're looking here on the cloak. We'll let that dry for a minute, and we'll come back and check on our face over here, see how things are going. We are mostly dry there. So, we need a good eye color for him. And he's got almost like an ochre color eye. So we go for a Sulphide Ochre so we can highlight up. I already have some on my palette, because I realized that after I shake it up a whole bunch. This is a nice thing about a wet palette, is that a little bit of water brings this paint right back to life. So if you don't use a wet palette, I would highly recommend getting one. You're probably not going to be able to see this very well on stream because it's such a small detail that I'm working on here. All right. So, one thing I did just notice that I forgot is he has little pieces that run off to the side of his mouth that are metallic here. There we go. And then into our Brainmatter Beige again to touch up a spot. And then I'm going to go into my Brainmatter Beige again with my fine tip brush. And I'm going to touch up around those streaks I put on his face. I wish there were a better way for me to show you what I'm doing here. It's tough with everything set up for catching the whole miniature. Getting the whole head on there is hard. But if you actually try really hard, he does actually have the little triangle shapes at the top. And you can get them in there if you're careful. If you work with a little bit thicker paint, you can run your brush sideways and it won't get in the little cracks. Not straight the thickness of out of the bottle, but a little bit thicker than you would if you're base coating. So, alright. Let's go back into the Sulphide Ochre again and do another coat on the eyes. Just to make sure they're really yellow. Did my sound level drop? Or just the music? I'm reading my mic level as being okay. The music's a little quieter. It's a quieter song. Is that better? If you can hear me in the chat, let me know. I got just a little bit of red somewhere I don't want it. So, or not red, some yellow. So we'll go touch it up real quick. Let that dry and then we'll fix it again. Here's where we're at so far, if I can get it in focus. Alright, so one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to thin out some of this Necromancer Cloak and put some dirty streaks on his face. Just checking if y'all... Mic check, mic check. Alright. Let's go back into our Sulphide Ochre again. We're still waiting on the red over there to dry, and we're going to fix that eye. There we go. Alright. And last but not least, we're going to go get his little iris on there. quicker shot with it. So get the area wet. Clean it up a little bit. It's okay. We can fix it. Oops. Alright. As I go way over, so we'll touch that area up with a little bit of white once it dries. Try and get into focus here. Alright. Let's go ahead and get our saber blades the color we want them to be. So the color I'm going to use for one saber blade is Voidshield Blue. I already have a little bit on my palette.
Because you died. Out of your cell you ran and then you died. You paused to catch your breath and die another gruesome death, so now you creep around each corner terrified.
And then for our other saber we're going to use Jungle Green. Good to hear, John. Thanks, Sarah, for letting me know. I mean, not good to hear that it was on your end, but I'm glad it's nothing on my end.
You must learn to take the torture in your stride. Bells chime, torment, darkest descent. Every soul spent through sent. Down in the depths of the dead, feel the agony. Scars from 1,000 wounds in your memory. Over and over, grind through the butchery. Once more you run this gauntlet of misery.
So Jungle Green. Back to our Brainmatter Beige for a minute. Touch up a couple areas on the chest.
Brave you may be, you think that your mind is tough. Come have a go if you think you're hard enough. Dive into death, embrace all the treachery. Learn to enjoy the bloodshed and butchery. Bells chime, torment.
Just touching up a couple areas that I got black on too. Again, we're not spending too much time focusing on the areas that will be covered by the cloak. I think I've mentioned that a couple times, but just want to make sure that's clear. Still waiting on the coat to dry, or the cloak to dry. We're going to go back and touch up some of our areas where we got white on places we didn't want. So we'll grab that fine tip brush we've been working with. That'll let us really do some line work along the edges of things. Touching up the areas we got a little bit of white that we didn't need. These little ball joints on his legs on the outside of the knee are black in the reference photo that I have. So we'll look at those. The other side is a little bit tougher. It's covered by a saber, so we'll do the best we can. The inside of the knees. Just looking for spots where we missed or overshot. Like I said, white's easier to cover with black than vice versa, so. Take your time doing this part. You can put in as much effort or as little effort as you want into this part, so that is up to you. You want to try to let the black wash cover up as much as you can? Feel free. Just taking another look. Alright. Brainmatter Beige, there's a couple spots that I neglected. Like the top of this hand here. Fixing some touch-up. And on the bottom of these fingers here, and that whole hand in general. Okay. Just trying to make sure that we're all good before we put that cape on, because there's not a whole lot of going back once we put that on later. I think we're looking pretty good here. Here's where we're at so far. I had it in focus for a minute. Maybe I need to switch hands because I think it likes focusing on my ring. I'm not sure. Let's try something else. It washes out the color with the white background. What about with the black background? No, it's too bright with the black background. Oh well. I tried, had it for a second. That's about as good as we're gonna get, focus-wise. Alright, so one thing I do want to do is his gun just feels a little plain to me, you know? I think I'm gonna put some silver gunmetal on it. I don't know if this is canon or not, but we're gonna make the end of it gunmetal. So I'm taking some pure gunmetal I didn't thin down and kind of doing a dry brush effect on it. And once we wash it up, it'll look good, I promise. It just felt plain. Alright, so the other thing we're going to do is his chest kind of glows a little bit green. In the pictures I've seen and the references, well, two things. From what I can see, his little neck piece under here is actually red. So, or part of it's red. So we're going to paint under his neck red. And then into his chest, we're going to put, is green skin the color I want? No. We're going to go with angel green to start, and we'll lighten up to green skin, or lighten up to mixing in a little bit of jungle green. I have to set my colors that I use to the side so that when I write up my guide on the description, I don't forget. Because what I do is I'll write a color down, then I put it back in my paint holder. So for the most part, there's a couple areas we're going to focus on with this green. Inside each side of the rib cage, and in the middle of the chest. So we'll let that dry for a minute. And while we're waiting, we're going to get a little bit more Brainmatter Beige. And we got to fix that eye socket that I overshot just a little bit. Not much. Thin it down just a touch. And bring that eye socket back to white. last thing we're going to do, if we can, is we're going to put our little eye highlights in. So just a little teeny dot. Into the eye. I have a better brush that I use for this. I don't know why I'm using that one. Somewhere. Has a much finer point on it. All right. Just need to do a little bit more touch up on the eye socket. Let's see if I can get this in focus. There's where we're at on the face. Alright, second coats on our sabers. And into our jungle green. Alright. We're going to work on our sabers now. So, step one, a little bit of gunmetal. Get our hilts. We're going to do one as gunmetal. Again, I don't know how canon this theme is that I'm going for here on the sabers, but one's going to be gunmetal around the top and the other's going to be a copper color around the top. If it's not canon, oh well. I know there's a story about where his sabers came from and all that good stuff. Will be mostly canon here. So we've got a weapon bronze that I'm going to use. I don't tend to use this color very often, but I think it'll be good for that. Should have waited for the blue to dry a little bit more, but that's okay. Bottom hilt, we're going to do bronze around that too, just because, make it look different. As I paint off of camera again. Alright, we're going to let those dry a little bit more. Our red is mostly dry, so we'll go into that. Second coat on the red. not being super neat about doing our red here because it's easy to touch up the black with it later. As I shake like a leaf for a second there. Alright, that may take one more light coat afterwards. One thing I'm going to do while I'm working on it is we're going to get this Brainmatter Beige collar painted in. Paint's quite thicker than I wanted. So just for chatting purposes, I've started listening to the Thrawn series on audiobook during my commutes to work, and it's really good. I'm about 9 chapters into the first book. I've thoroughly been enjoying it. Have any of y'all listen to any Star Wars audiobooks if you're a Star Wars fan? Or read any of the books? So we're going to let that dry. Set it off to the side. I need to take a quick break, get a drink of water. I have my water bottle here at my table, I just don't think y'all want to hear me chug water. It's a weird sound. Just get an idea of what he's going to look like. Quite happy with him so far. I'm waiting on this saber to finish drying a little bit. The green's a little blobby. And I accidentally marked up the bottom of the saber, so we'll fix that. Alright, well. About to go to sleep, guess that can wait. So, the Benjamin, which Benjamin are you? How's it going, Benjamin? Glad to have you here. Sareth, I am loving it so far. And I wasn't a huge Thrawn fan, but a lot of it's because I didn't know the backstory necessarily. Like, I've always been a Star Wars fan, but I've never been a big reader. And, yeah. Cool. I'm more of an Imperial fan, but I did like the Rogue Squadron stuff from a long time ago. But now they're not canon anymore, and that bums me out. Good to hear, Benjamin. Me too. Me too. Happy at my paint table. Happy with the work that's been going on so far. Or that's been produced so far. Can't complain. We're going to let him dry for a second, and then we'll get to washing the body. We still have to do a little bit of work on the face and... or a little bit of work on the cloak before it's ready for a wash, but we can get the rest of it ready to go. So while we're doing that, and while we're chatting about our books, I'm going to clean my paint wells out a little bit. Just using my fingernail to scrape out some of the old dried on wash in there. Really, I didn't know that. I mean, you had the old Thrawn series, you know, back from before Disney got their hands on canon. And they were good, I read those. Growing up. I haven't seen Rebels Thrawn yet, but I've heard he was not the best. I was waiting to watch Rebels until my son was old enough to appreciate it, and he is just now getting there. So what I've got is some dark tone, and we're going to start getting a wash applied to all of his metals. Take your time doing this, try not to get it onto the white areas. And as I do it, I notice an area in his behind that I got some white over that I didn't want there. So we'll let that dry for a minute and come back and wash that spot in a second. Make sure you push that black wash all the way right up against the white areas, because it's going to help cover up some of those white imperfections that you may have left behind on accident, like I do. Again, I will shamelessly use my wash for what it's designed for, adding shadows, highlights, and cover-up. So I'm going to work on one leg at a time. I know normally you work from top to bottom. I am doing legs. Mostly because I'm not pulling the wash over the entire body. Thanks. I posted them a few days ago when I was building my droid army when I did that stream, and then I saw today that somebody took a very similar pose. But, I mean, I guess there's only so many poses that you can do. But I thought I would be unique with the 2 sabers and a gun. Apparently I don't think differently than most everyone else. That and Sarathir stole my other idea. I'm gonna call him out for it. Oh yeah, no, the new Thrawn books, the old Thrawn books are great. The new ones are really good too. I know what we forgot to do, but we'll do it after we wash it, is bring that green up to a brighter green. But I don't want to kill the highlights that I'm going to do on his chest piece. with the wash, so it's not a big deal that we missed it. Just try not to let too much wash pool up on the green. Something's rubbing up against the microphone. We'll fix that. All right, gun. These new sprue models they just feel brittle. Am I the only one that feels that way if you've handled them at all? I mean, I know they're going to be more brittle than the old style because they're a different plastic, but they feel super brittle. I had talked about actually doing that saber spin, and rather than paper, I would have used like clear, almost overhead projector paper, and colored it to the color of the sabers. So feel free to use that idea if that's what you want to do with the spinning sabers. It would be like a semi-pliable plastic. Somebody did that. I saw it in the Legion Facebook chat, or Facebook group, not chat. I want to say it was LJ Pena that I saw do it. With the saber in his foot. Again, you gotta be pretty selective with your washes here. You don't want to get into that white too much. Sorry, I keep migrating off stream. Slowly as I work. It's just washing though, it's not anything super difficult to do. Forgot to wash behind his kneecap. Alright, we're going to let him sit and dry for a minute. Benjamin, this pack is not for public release. We got this early at Gen Con. So, stood in line at Gen Con. Well, I didn't have to stand in line per se. For playing in the Legion tournament at Gen Con, I was guaranteed one. But I did stand in line to get a second one for my son and I, and one for a customer. Who has taken very good care of my paint studio over the time. I can count on him to have me paint at least 2 of everything Imperial that comes out, so I felt like I at least had to try to get him one of these. Alright. So, soft tone. Soon, I think they come out in September. I think. I want to test something real quick. Yeah, I think that'll work. We're going to test this color on his back plate, because if it messes it up, nobody will see it. It's a little too brown, so we're going to thin it just a little bit. About 50-50 water to wash. And let's test that now. That's better. All right. Yeah, that's much better. All right. So here it goes on the head. That's with the wash applied. We'll start washing some of our white plates on the arm. Nope, we're not going to do too much of that just yet. We're going to wait for our black wash to completely dry, because what tends to happen is, I know I'm painting off stream, I did that on purpose, is if you try to wash one area too soon, it'll pull some of that wash out onto it. So we can start putting our third coat of red on though, onto our cloak underside, and that should be the last one that we need. It's looking pretty good under here. Yeah, this will be the last coat. Alright, so I'm going to grab my fine brush. We're going to go into some of this Necromancer Cloak that's thinned, and we'll do some line touch-ups along the edge of the cloak where I overshot because I was being messy. when you're doing the red, don't be afraid to overshoot a little bit. Benjamin, to answer your question, the Phase 1 clones are just going to be mostly white, because that's what they were canon-wise. And then Phase 2, we're going to look into other things. My personal armies are very canon, so the reason for that is so that I can show that I can paint the canon, or box art, you could say, is what the painter world term is box art. But I have a customer that I have an idea. He's going to have me do some of the specific legions. Probably definitely 501st. We're going to do some more touching up of this collar piece in here. And then once that dries, we'll go in and touch up our Necromancer Cloak around the outside. We can probably get it now. Right, so here's the cloak. So far, we'll let it dry, and then we'll give it its wash. We can probably start washing the back side of it here, though. Just a touch of water so it flows. It's starting to dry in the pot, or in the well. Cool. You'll have to post a picture to my Facebook page when you finish that up. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see you guys' paint jobs that you're working on. Clones are my next streaming army. So I probably will be streaming clones tomorrow. Just looking at a few things. We will see. My intent is to stream tomorrow. Just taking wash off of some areas that got a little too heavy. And applying some to some areas that I think could use a little bit more. Let that dry for a little bit. Oh, I see a nice blob in there that I don't like. Great, I look forward to it, Benjamin. I'm still baffled that 6 of you are still here in my stream watching me. I love it. I'm so happy that we're getting to spend this time together. Alright. We're going to go into some of this green. We're going to mix some of this together to make a little bit lighter green for the chest area glow. Had a little over there at the end, but that's solvable. Fixed. Alright. And ever so slightly, we're going to get just a little bit of touch of that jungle green. Nothing too heavy. Go. I don't know if you can see that in there. Try to get it in focus. Nope. Probably not. You'll see it in the pictures, I promise. Time to wash the rest of him. So like I said, on these large plates, we're gonna just use it to color the paint to the color we want it, and then brush it off. So that's the other effect that wash has, is to darken your colors just a touch. See you, Benjamin. Thanks for sticking around for a little bit. Don't forget to show me those clones once they're done. So just cover everything in this wash. All the white areas. And if you get a little in the black areas, that's fine. You're not really going to see it with how much we thinned it down. Not with that black wash already being on there. I don't know. September-ish is last I heard. I need it to come out because I need one more box. / I need more stuff so I can actually use this army. And I know there's plenty of you out there waiting to get your first stuff. So realistically, there's not a whole lot I can do with this army. I didn't get anything except two cores. One for me, one for my son, and one for, well, 3 cores, one for a customer, but for my personal stuff, 2 cores. One for me, one for my son. Alright. We are all washed up here. Try to get them in focus. Darken just a little bit, nothing too crazy. And we'll go back and we'll highlight it up some once it dries. What I'm doing here is I'm running my brush across that scapula to take some of the extra semi-dried wash off. Alright, so while we're waiting for that, double check on our cloak and see how things are drying up there. Once it's dried enough, you can't really do a whole lot to it, so don't touch it. But what we can do is get the underside. What I'm going to do is I have a red wash. I'm going to take just a touch or two of that, a dot, and I'm going to mix in like 2 to 1 dark tone to red wash. And just a touch of water to make it flow a little better. Thank you. Maybe 50-50 black to red. Yep. That's the color. 50-50 black and red. Go with a little bit more black over it in some areas where it's going to be darker.
Sun and the rain and the thunder, Christ for the world is my shrine. So many places I've wandered, so many I've yet to find. Strong hearts will master the means, firm blades and dungeons, small parts I've seen.
Alright, we'll let that dry real quick. There's a couple areas that are pooling already, so I want to make sure that doesn't pool. I'll let that sit. Alright, so while we're waiting on that, we're going to start working on some of our highlights on the face. So, we're going to go... Here's where we're starting. See if I can get them in stream. Here's where we're starting. Take some thin down Brainmatter Beige, real thin, so that you can hide your brush strokes with it. Remember, always pull your highlights up to the highest level that you want them. Alright, make sure you get under his eye. Really exaggerate that highlight, push that contrast up. So around his orbital socket. If you mess up, flood the area with some water, pull it out with a dry brush. Like I got some white into his actual eye socket. So, it's easy fix. And I went a little too far with my white in the other one. But again, easy fix. There we go. Alright. Highlight the tops of these. When I'm highlighting, I tend to talk less because concentrating. Alright, we're going to second coat the top of his head. Yeah, I've found push the highlights just a touch further than you think you need to. I need to stop using this crappy brush and go to my good brush. You can make a mediocre paint job look really good with decent highlighting. So don't be afraid to push them just a little bit further than you think you would normally. Miniatures don't take light the same as real life. They do generally, but you really need to make sure that you're accenting some of that light and helping it. If you don't help it, it sometimes isn't going to help you. So, make sure you're picking out those areas. Alright. I went and jacked up my eye again over here. We're going to touch it up and then leave it alone. Put it back, then we'll paint it again once it dries, and then leave it alone. So I do need to go back and put my little scrape marks in on his face. So thin down Necromancer Cloak, super thin. Since I painted over them. There's where we look at so far. Alright, last attempt on this side. Socket over here. And bless America. think I got it that time. Ta-da. Alright, so what I'm going to actually do is I am going to pull down some of my pure matte white. And we're going to do some very select highlighting with it. Don't go overboard with this. It can get overpowered real quick. And it loses its effect if you overpower it. So I would do like the outside of the eye socket here. Very select areas. Don't glue your fingers together. The droid army is, oh my lord. I have a whole video on it, my real name. If you go in my playlist, there's a video on me assembling the droid army. They're just not super friendly to put together. Alright, I think we'll call this done. Yep, I'm happy with it. Very happy with it. Let's see how we're doing here. See if I can pull off just some of this wash that's pooling up down here without making a mess. Some of it needs a little bit deeper wash, so to really bring out some of the characteristic in it. I should have just went for a straight black wash. So that's what I'm doing. There we go. Let that dry again. And then we'll start working on some highlights on this guy. So we're going to start on our white. We need Brainmatter Beige. And we don't want to lose all that color that we've put in. So thinned Brainmatter Beige. Again, push your highlights up towards the areas of highest highlight. Think of where your light's going to hit. And if you're working with the cloak also, you have to keep in mind where your cloak is. That's why it helps to kind of pre-assemble them a little bit. Just put the cloak on so that you have a picture in your mind. Something I did before of where that cloak's going to be so that you can leave a little bit more shadow there. So like for example, I know the very corner of this pauldron is going to be covered by cloaks, so I'm not going to take as much of that shadow away. Pick out your highlights. Again, focus on areas where light would hit differently. And don't be afraid to push them pretty far, especially when working with these white colors. You really have to create some differentials for the light. Just highlighting, highlighting, highlighting. There's lots of little ridges and edges for you to highlight on this guy. You can do as much or as little as you want. It's really up to you how much highlighting you do. You could have just washed them and called it a day if you wanted. He looked good washed. But taking this extra 20 to 30 minutes of work is really going to put yours on a different level than everybody else's. And I really like the live streaming format for tutorial videos because you guys get to see exactly what I do, the mistakes I make, how I fix the mistakes I make. Because I promise that I'm not the first person to make those mistakes, and I won't be the only one. And so you get to see what I do to correct them. And it helps remove that magic, as I call it, finish the owl effect. I'm sure other people call it that too, where you see they say, oh, paint this white, and then boom, you're done. And they cut to like a finished miniature that you're like, now I know you did other stuff. Some of these areas of highest highlights might take 2 highlights, that's okay. we'll finish this guy up tonight. Especially since his base is already done, since I did it when I did the droids. Since I was working on them already. Alright, here's where we're at. So we're going to go back into our white real quick and we're going to pick out some extreme highlights. So like Knuckles. Make sure you thin your white just a little bit. Otherwise you'll get nasty brush strokes. Like I said, make sure you're pushing that white up to the areas of highest highlight. I don't use matte white for much, but extreme highlights is one of them. Again, keep in mind where the light's gonna hit. You don't want to end up highlighting something extreme highlight and then later it's like, oh, well, the light's not gonna hit that area. So like down here on this leg, we're not going to do any because his cloak's going to be flowing over it. We might get a couple of little pick points out here on the knee. But nothing super fancy. However, this knee's moving a little bit further forward, so we'll have a little bit more. Just correcting a couple brush strokes here. All right. Last question. No, it's just for looks. He does have a blaster card that you can get and use in game, so that's an option. But this game, unlike other unnamed systems, is not what you see is what you get. What I'm doing is applying a sepia wash to, or the soft tone wash here, to the color. It's not what you see is what you get, it is what looks cool to you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take this saber green, we're going to mix in just a little bit of our Brainmatter Beige, make a lighter color, and we're going to, first thing is cover the red that I somehow got on the tip of the saber. Not sure how that happened. Cool. That's awesome. Okay. So, we'll come back to that thought. We're going to go with the blue one first. And a little bit of Brainmatter Beige into it. And we will kind of slide it up as if it were a lightsaber core. A little bit more Brainmatter Beige. I just do this to a couple sides to give it a little bit of color difference. It doesn't have to be a whole lot to get the effect. And we'll do the same thing up here with this green. Make some little streakies in there. And Jedi, ask as many questions as you want. That's what I'm here for, is to answer questions. Alright, cool trick time. We're going to come across here and do some very light OSL over on this gun. In this hand. So the way I'm doing that is just taking some green. Can't see it on there, you'll see it in the pictures, I promise. And a little bit around the hand, not a whole lot. Lightsaber light falls off pretty quick, so be real careful with it. We just want enough to let people say, oh look, there's something cool there. So I'm using some very thin paint to do this. Very thin. Like wash consistency, if not a little bit thick, just a touch thicker. You don't have to do this on yours if you don't want. I'm doing just a little bit of mine, not taking it too far. About as far as I want to go with it. It's very subtle. It'll show up in pictures, but it's not going to show up on this camera, I don't think. And those little white highlights help pick it out just a little bit. Onto our cloak. So, first step is we're going to take some of this Necromancer Cloak and we're going to get some of our highlights back. Thin it down a lot. Again, highlights is where you want to try to lose your brush strokes. So push up to some of those areas of highest highlight. And here you can really do as much or as little highlighting as you want on the cloak. Your wash should have done some for you. Really pick out some of the ridges. But make sure you're working with thin paint. You'll know it's thin enough when you can barely see the lines of when you apply it, it kind of feathers out just a touch for the highlights. again, this step you can do as much or as little as you want on this step. I'm going to do quite a bit. Just highlighting. But don't lose all your pretty blacks in there that you've added with your wash. Alright. So, one thing I do like to do is I like to highlight with blues instead of whites when it comes to black. It just makes it look different. So I'm going to take a little bit of this Voidshield Blue and mix it in with my gray. Well, my Necromancer Cloak. And just get one shade lighter with it. And really focus on some of the higher highlight areas. Too thick right there, so feather out the edge with a wet brush. If you're gonna pick an area to highlight, highlight closer to the face more. Because what it does is it helps draw somebody's eyes up there. And it draws them away from the body, which you may have decided to spend a little bit less time on if you want. So, like I said, if you have to pick an area to highlight and spend more time on highlighting, the face area. So this cloak around the face is going to be your focus. Speed painting trick that I've learned over the years. Alright, we're going to go with just one touch lighter for some extreme highlights up here on the top. Alright, so underneath is going to be a different beast. We'll do a few select highlights, but it's really a cloth cloak, so it doesn't get a whole lot, so that's a little too pink for what I want. Alright, so I'm just going to dot some highlights onto some of these quilt areas. Again, you don't have to do this. You can do as much or as little as you want as far as this highlighting goes. But I'm keeping in mind where I think light's going to hit. I'm only doing this to the areas that I'm certain light's going to hit. And I'm trying to focus on the upturned corners of them. How's it going, Ethan? Just putting some finishing touches on a Grievous. Really focusing on the area that's not going to be too obscured by body and stuff. So you could dry brush this if you wanted, but you're going to get a little bit dustier effect than just doing the dot game that I'm playing right now. I got to give my hand a break. The cape is the last thing that I'm finishing up. So I'll show you where I'm at here, Ethan. Let me set this cape down real quick. Here's my face. Let's see if I can get it into focus here. There's the face. Here's my body. This is going to be tougher to get into focus because my camera's being a pain. So there's the body, and then I'm finishing up the cloak. Need a little bit more of that vampire red. I've actually decided I do like that pink color a little bit, so we're going to use that as my highlight for a lot of it. Because it dries darker than it looks. Again, I'm focusing on the quilt parts that are going to be actually seen and that need highlights. This is probably going to be the most tedious part that you do. But again, only focus on the ones that you know they're going to see. We'll finish this Grievous in about 3 hours total. Not 3 hours from now, 3 hours total. I've done the droids also. Didn't stream the droids, mostly because I did an assembly video on them. And then I just painted them and didn't even kind of realize that I was painting them, if that makes sense. Like, I just mindlessly went into painting them after assembling and priming. And then I realized that I probably can't do a video on droids as much as I want to, because I use my airbrush for 90% of them, and I don't have an effective setup for filming my airbrushing yet. So what I'm doing is stopping every now and again to hold it up and see if there's anywhere I've missed that the light's hitting. Give me a few and I'll show you what one of my droids looks like again. I showed him earlier in the stream. Alright. I know there's a stick in the way. Let me watch this. Let's see if I can get it in focus. Sometimes it doesn't like to work. Anyways, we'll go into our Brainmatter Beige. We're going to highlight this collar real quick. Made a boo-boo. Wet brush, pull it up. That's how we fix it. Alright. Lastly, I don't see this bit on the reference photo I'm using, but there's like a little clasp here we're just going to paint at gunmetal. It may or may not be canon, but it's going to be gunmetal on ours. Alright. Moment of truth. You know what? I really want to pick out some of the highlights on his arms and legs. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of this pure Necromancer Cloak. We will mix in just a touch of that blue, again, that blue mix. And we'll do some light highlight picking out. Not a whole lot. I promised I'd show you a couple of my droids. I went for a Geonosis theme. For some reason my camera doesn't like to do close-ups. But if you look at the thumbnail on my YouTube video, or go on my YouTube page, or on my Facebook page, you'll be able to see them a little bit better. So, gray highlights. Again, do as much or as little of this as you want. Just keep in mind that some of it's going to be covered by his cloak if you're doing the cloak effect. Thanks, Ethan. Yeah, check out my channel, check out my Facebook, but there's an assembly guide for the droids. It's just me assembling them and griping about how much paint I get on my fingers. But it does kind of give some tips on, here's what I found works for me. I wanted to do a little bit more detail on this arms. You can do as much of this or as little as you want. I think I'm happy with that now. Kind of have to play with this cloak to get it on correctly. There we go. Alright, we need to get some glue on there. You can probably hear my cat in the background, and I do apologize for that. Oops. Just super glued my thumb to it. So, now that we've got that on there, I see some areas that need just a little OSL, just a touch. Not a whole lot. Don't let your OSL colors run into the recesses. And then his face. All right. We have one finished Grievous. I'm trying to get him in video for you. Come on, camera. I'm not sure what's going on. Let's put a black background here. See if that helps. There we go. Maybe my hand's messing it up. I can catch him in focus for just a second. Well, I'll take pictures, of course, and have them up on the channel here in a minute. Or on the Facebook in a minute. last thing I need to do is remove them very carefully off this. And get him onto his base. What you see me doing is the hot glue sometimes makes it so that paint doesn't get to certain areas. So it's just touching that up a little bit. Thanks, Ethan. I went for something a little bit unique. And I'm sure yours will look great. When you finish them up, post pictures on the Facebook page, my Facebook page. I'd love to see it. Having some minor issues getting him to stick to his base, but we'll get there. There we go. Alright, I'm gonna get off here, go get some pictures taken. We painted up a Grievous in 3 hours on the stream. 3 hours. If I can do it, I promise any of you can do it. Just follow the guide, and you'll do just fine. Thanks for sticking through with me. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off my music here and play my outro, and then we will get off of here. So, thanks for hanging around. Have a good night, everybody. Show your appreciation by hitting the like button. You can subscribe by hitting the logo in the center of their screen to see all the new stuff as it comes out. Find me on social media at xxnerferderxx for Twitter, Facebook, Jagged Brush Studios. To see the next video, hit the video on the left. To see the newest upload, hit the video on the right. And I hope you enjoyed. Get out there and paint some more.